General advice, warning and disclaimer. Opinions, thoughts, research, recommendations and content presented are general advice only. They do not take into account your specific circumstances. Please consult a financial professional before making any investment decisions. For further information on our disclaimers and general advice, please see our website and our PDS.
So we've seen Brent oil and crude light oil in the futures up 9%, which is a big one-day intraday gain. Obviously, the Europeans will be waking up in a few hours, getting involved with that, and then US later tonight. So it's up 9% in early Asian trade. So that will be something to watch. Any sort of oil-derived stocks will be good.
Absolutely, especially with an attack on Iran.
Correct.
Major producer.
Yeah. And the other thing I suppose that to look at is that Israelis, who are a very tactical sort of military force compared to most, they've destabilized a lot of their Iranian deposits and their uranium manufacturing sort of areas because they're worried about uranium enrichment, nuclear war, blah, blah, blah. So that's going to be very interesting because that was sort of a theme that we had been seeing lately with the US, but now that there's sort of this focus back on uranium, maybe the public and governments around the world won't want to develop uranium any further. Maybe it just adds that fear back into it, and oil could stay the forefront as it has been for the last 80, 100 years.
Well, that kind of ties in well to the other thing that we wanted to talk a lot about earlier, the nice start, the peaceful start of the week, which was chip manufacturers and Jensen Huang from NVIDIA.
US trade negotiations with China.
So what I mean by that is with all this AI integration chips, these places like you've seen it with Meta, you've seen it with Microsoft and Thermal, they're all looking to make SMRs, semi-modular reactors. And what that means is that they're going to need power at some point. And obviously, Trump, about a week or so ago, said that he wants nuclear power and need energy for government. So not just in the private, but also the public sector there. So it's a bit of an interesting one because the Israelis are using that as almost a lightning rod. And look, I'm not going to get too political into it to obviously attack the Iranians, but the world's still going to need nuclear power, especially with the demand for AI at the moment.
Yep.
So the question is, well, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot.
We saw the UK as well exploring small nuclear reactors as well this week.
Yep.
So it is definitely a theme.
Becoming much more mainstream now.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing with Iran and Israel, I think, will it blow over like it kind of, with Palestine, it sort of blew over pretty quickly in the news cycle.
The
market might be, yeah, but I feel there may be, and it's interesting, it happens on sort of a Friday night before the weekend when most markets are shut, except obviously your crypto and futures are open until quite early Saturday morning.
US tonight.
You all of a sudden have sort of three massive sort of power brokers, which is the Saudis, Iran, and then you have Israel. And two of those, major power brokers are now at war, or potentially at war, the start of a war, definitely. And I think that just changes everything because they have the means to be able to fight. Where Palestine, as bad as it says, they had nothing. They were struggling for water. And, correct.
Okay.
So it's they're no longer fighting the proxies of Iran. They're going for the head of the snake, so to speak.
Do you think it will escalate into proper conflict, or will it be preemptive attacks like they've done in the past?
I think it escalates, seeing that particularly Trump has stated that he wants no US soldiers in war. They moved them out.
Yeah.
And now he's kind of like, well, you wanted it, so you can fight your own wars. And I think without sort of the US being able to power broker it or control it through intervention. I think it could, and it's going to be interesting to see what the if Saudi Arabia gets involved, because it's sort of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They don't like the Israelis. They definitely don't like the Iranians, haven't for centuries or whatever. So now you've got two of your enemies fighting each other.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting to see if they try and do a power grab, seeing that they're weakening or they're destabilised. So I think it does. I think without the US involved, I think it does become a much bigger conflict. Yeah.
I think that feeds more into the defence theme that we've been pursuing at the moment
Yep.
as well. You know, companies.
It's sort of been the theme definitely for the best part of the last 6 months, and we spoke about how Trump was pushing NATO to sort of increase the spending budget and sort of exposure to some of those defence companies. And as bad as it sounds, I know it's a conflict and people die, but it's generally things do well in war. Yeah. So, do you have any recommendations on that, David?
In the defence,
so we've been buying more wide mode options. So there's various ETFs out there that give you wide mode exposure. Obviously, we've got stocks that we prefer.
Yep.
But just to play on the theme at the moment, there's various ETFs that play on that defence
sort of sector.
Yep. Obviously, if you were doing a personal picking, there's specific stocks that we'd be buying there to really get the most out of it. But a really easy way to get an edge with ETF.
But basically, most defence companies are on government contracts. So, for lack of, mind the pun, but it is a very defensive play buying defence because, no, I'm serious, because basically they're long-term contracts. These things go for years, and it's from taxation of citizens. So these contracts will go for a long time. So they'll either go up quickly or they're just going to grind high for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Yep.
And as you're starting to see, the world is starting to encroach from going from a globalised place to a more nationalistic stance. People are going to be defending their own countries, which means every country is going to individually have to up their GDP for a defence budget. Yep. And so it's just an easy thematic to start getting. I mean, if you haven't got it across yet, you've missed part of the boat, but trust me, there's plenty of it to go. A bit scary. A lot of it, I don't know, personally, that echoes not the 1930s. You're having all these wars. So you've got Pakistan and India had a little thing going on.
Little skirmish.
You've got Israel obviously going into the Gaza Strip and bombing Lebanon, and now they're going after Iran. You've obviously got the Ukraine and Russia situation. And there's worries about China, overtaking Taiwan in the next couple of years. I think it's early 2027, 2029.
Yeah.
It's scary in my mind because that's a lot of these civil wars and things. And then this brings us to the next thing, the protests that you see in the US at the moment. When you have internal civil wars and then you have countries next to each other, that was all of this. Basically kicked off World War II, all these other things across the globe. I'm not saying that we're heading to a World War III. It's just very interesting how history repeats itself. And there's a lot of similar things happening that was happening in the 1930s. What's happening now. It's just interesting to watch. Scary, but interesting. Yeah.
A bit more on the positive side, it's hard to ignore, the political unrest, but I think we should be a bit stock specific. The chip manufacturers and chip designers this week have done pretty well.
Very well.
So Oracle reporting, NVIDIA's been doing their Euro tour, where they've announced really key partnerships. Yeah, so you have a Nordisk in the medical
France
space.
Yep.
And then you got Bay Systems, which is one of the major military groups in UK. So I think there's some key relationships there that can really propel NVIDIA to new business endeavors.
I think so. Spaces. NVIDIA's kind of held up the Nasdaq and the US markets in the last couple of weeks. It's just outperformed. But then you see that even with the pause with the trade deals with China, they were saying that there's the global demand elsewhere, and you can see it now from him doing this tour in Europe, where people, and the Middle East, when Trump went over there and did his golf tour and everything like that. So, we have Broadcom as a recommendation that we got clients into. It looked like it was going to smash their earnings report. They beat on revenue, they beat on earnings. So the market had already priced in because it was at all-time highs when they beat their report. So pull back a little bit, and then the last couple of days it's done very well. It's got about 5 or 6%.
Along with most of
the other ones as well. So you can't go wrong with the chips at the moment, and I don't think the demand's going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think it's
No,
still
it seems to be increasing and becoming more efficient. So, yeah.
And that comes back to the you're talking about semi-modular reactors before. If everybody's using the chips, it's going to use a lot of energy.
Yep.
Where are they going to get this clean energy from? Nuclear power.
Yep.
So it ties in.
Everything sort of feeds into itself.
Feeds into itself. Like, there you go. There's the partnership between Bay and NVIDIA. Defense and chips are the two main things we're talking about at the moment.
Yep.
So,
always take advantage.
Definitely. In terms of, so that's obviously sector specific and stocks, but in terms of just global economic and macro factors, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff happening data wise. It's very interesting in the US that a lot of the data that's been coming out is now factored in Liberation Day. So obviously Trump sweeping tariffs in April. You're starting to see the data come out now that it's factored in a lot of that stuff. The US has been surprisingly resilient in their economic data, making it seem that, so everybody was like, oh, in the back end of the year, we're going to have a recession and things like that. You saw Citigroup upgrading the S&P. You saw there are a couple of other big banks that were upgrading the S&P Bank of America. Yep. I don't think we're going to have a recession at this point in time. I mean, things are changing on a daily basis at the moment, but it looks good.
Like pretty consistent numbers, like jobs data was
good.
CPI was reasonable.
Inflation pulled a little bit. So what do
you? Well, CPI didn't. It didn't rise as quickly as they expected. So the reasonable result after, as you said, all that sort of tariff fear, they thought it was going to get slugged on the consumer, but most have been able to weather that because it was a sort of a start-stop event, never eventuated, so to speak.
Yeah.
Jobs data has been very resilient despite all sort of the Doge cuts. The private sector seems to be strengthening against the public sector, where under the Biden administration, the private sector was decreasing rapidly, and then there was some point, if I am accurate, it was almost like 2-to-1 hirings in the public sector under the Biden administration, which was inflating the job numbers and the health of the economy. I think the CPI is going to be interesting because if this Iran Israel thing develops into a full-scale war or escalates for a longer period, you can see oil remain elevated. I think we checked, it was like $72 or $76. So if that remains higher for longer, what's going to happen is your inputs into manufacturing and running businesses is going to increase, which is then going to bring inflation back. So that's going to be very interesting because Trump's done everything he can to reduce oil, which he's done a pretty significant job, to be fair. Credit goes where credit's due, but now with this geopolitical risk, that could really start seeing CPI ramp up towards the end of the year if it remains elevated. That's a big if.
That's interesting because when you said that growth in manufacturing, back to my tinfoil hat theory, that's exactly what happened in Europe in the 1930s. Manufacturing went through, the industrialization went up.
Yep.
The exact same thing, and it's following a bit of a pattern there as well. So that's interesting that happened.
So I think, but they're staying resilient. There is a lot of echoes from Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan and Ray Dalio of Bridgewater about the sort of the debt, how it just keeps increasing, and they're now sounding that it's going to probably be one of the worst debt events that we'll ever see in our lifetime. I know they are probably the most respected in the industry, but a lot of people have been calling this for 10, 15 years, to be fair. I don't know, maybe, yeah. And
then he realised, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how he's going to do it because on one hand, he's sort of deployed Doge, Elon to do Doge and do all these tax cuts and this, that. These government cuts. Then he's going for tax cuts. Yeah. But then he's like, okay, we need to spend big on military and spend big on infrastructure. And you're just like, well, I don't know. You're kind of like, it's almost like a contradictory note, really. So I don't know how they do it. I honestly don't. It wouldn't be the first time a country's written off their debt. So, and if anyone's got the balls to do it, it probably is him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been hated for bloody 8 years, or it's soon to be 12. So why not just do it? Yeah. And then I think another thing we were talking about before with NVIDIA and some of the pharmaceutical sort of plays. There's been a big development with Robert Kennedy Jr. which we think is something. If you're playing in that sort of medical space, you need to be cautious. Is that he fired all 17 or 18?
There were 8. He took off.
Oh,
they
8
were
was
appointed
it?
by Biden, and he stuck 8.
Oh, I thought it was the whole.
No, I
thought
read
it
it
was
last
more.
night. It was 8.
So, stand corrected. He sacked the whole 8 that were in control of the vaccine board with the CDC, Controlled Disease Center or whatever it's called. So, if you're sort of looking at exposure, we personally think that that's too risky to be involved in because there's going to be, just like Trump, he's creating massive structural change.
Yeah.
He's going to create huge structural change.
And whether it's for better or worse on the medical industry in the US, I'd just say steer clear of it for now because it's more uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yep.
Whereas there's much easier wins to be had in areas like I said, chips. So demand's easy. AI is a thing now. It's going to go up. It's much easier to pick wins in that kind of space.
Yeah.
Like if he completely upheaves it, it might be really good. It might be really bad in the first couple of years and then really good. It might be just really bad. You don't know. What I say is what you don't know, steer clear of, work out where your wins are and go there where it's safer is what I'd say.
Yeah. And like he's just really beginning. Like he wants to cancel seed oils.
Yeah.
Which is gonna those repercussions, you're gonna have healthier children, less diabetes, so less probably diabetes medicine. Like it's a really
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting space. You'd be
things
very
like
sort of
get shut down and things.
Yeah.
Already sort of transition back to color.
Correct. Yeah.
Businesses that can pivot, and I think there's already some big fast food companies in America that has already announced. I think it was Five Guys or
Five Guys. Yeah.
No seed oils anymore.
No seed oils.
Like that. So the businesses that can pivot and adapt to that change will be the ones that do the best.
But you find in that medical space, you sort of feel like, well, if there's less demand for their products because people are healthier, who knows? Maybe they'll find another wonder drug or start getting into vitamins or.
Well, if they're all a lot of the guys that he replaced are anti-vaxxers. So if that goes more, people aren't going to be buying vaccines because in the US they have to pay for their healthcare. That's going to hit the bottom line of those companies like what are the big ones? AstraZeneca and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's going to definitely hit them. Pfizer, those ones. So
that's just a note of caution.
It's just a note. Just watch, like, if you've got healthcare stocks already, I'm not saying you should drop and run. I'm just saying just keep it in mind because it'll upheaval a lot of what's happening there. And you don't know the result yet because it hasn't been done.
And the funny thing I don't know if you noticed, but the funny thing to note about that is because it's sort of health related, it's never front of page. It's always this trade stuff where it's about money and business or military stuff about wars or disruption or LA riots or whatever. So you have to be really vigilant to sort of follow that. Easy to miss. Very easy to miss.
That's the shit, right? Because like that CDC thing, that really hasn't been in the headlines.
No,
I had to find that one yesterday.
For people holding stocks.
So it's something to watch out for. But apart from that, the market's at all-time highs, which is good news. It's back to almost February levels, which is all-time highs. So if you're holding stocks, probably up on a lot of positions right now.
Are we being cautious here?
Not me. I'm saying we're buying. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, with today's a bit different. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out. So I guess a little bit cautious. But what I would say is if you're picking good companies with good, healthy balance sheets that are doing good investment on a micro level, it should be fine. The overall market might pull back though.
Yeah. So we've seen that with certain stocks that we've picked lately where the market comes off on the night and
they're up.
They're against the market. So, there is opportunity out there. You just sort of
very careful.
I think it would be wise to trim some if you're well in the money, trim a bit at those levels.
At that top level. Take that 25% off.
Because you just don't know what this could do. Like, what if he comes out over the weekend and says, we're supporting Israel with the point of truth? Like that, just
the
market
on the sideline for that is ideal.
And you could easily see a 5% pullback like we did when the tariffs started, Liberation Day, very easily.
Or we could see it be ignored again.
Or we could, potentially, yeah. But I think maybe a bit of trimming, save a bit of cash. And
never hurts to be cautious.
No, but plenty of ways to play the market. You don't have to play from the short side. You can always find stuff that will benefit you in these sort of market conditions and volatility. So, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Take care.